The alien commander Zaroth stood tall on the shining metal floor of his warship. His eyes, cold and golden, looked down at the group of human prisoners kneeling before him. The ship's walls hummed with alien energy, glowing with blue light outside through the wide window. The planet Earth floated like a blue marble in the dark space. It was beautiful, yet to Zaroth it was nothing more than a conquered world. He laughed loudly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "So these are the humans," he said, his tone filled with amusement. "The brave warriors of Earth who thought they could fight the core empire." His soldiers, tall and strong with green skin and sharp eyes, laughed along with him. To them, this was not a battle won. It was a game played with children. Among the prisoners stood Captain Ryan Hale. His face covered in dirt and blood, his hands were tied, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. He did not lower his head like the others. He looked straight at Zaroth, and for a moment the alien paused. There was something strange about that human stare, something that refused to break. Zaroth smiled slowly, stepping closer. He bent down, his shadow covering Ryan's face. "Tell me, human," Zaroth said, "do you think courage will save you now?" Ryan stayed silent, his lips pressed tight. The alien chuckled. "Ah, the brave captain has lost his words." The silence in the hall grew heavy. One of the alien soldiers kicked Ryan to the ground. But even as pain flashed through his body, he did not cry out. He just stared at the floor and whispered, "You don't understand humans." Zaroth tilted his head, curious for a second, then laughed again. "Oh, I understand well enough. You fight, you fall, and you break." The alien turned to his soldiers. "Let this be a lesson to all who watch," he said proudly. "The humans are weak, emotional, and foolish. Their courage is only noise before defeat." The aliens cheered, hitting their weapons against their armor. But Ryan's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with anger. He knew this was not the end. As Zaroth walked away, Ryan spoke again, his voice quiet but sharp. "You can break our bodies, but never our spirit." The alien stopped. Turning slowly, the room went silent again. Zaroth's eyes narrowed. "Spirit," he repeated. A pretty word for a dying species. Ryan lifted his head, blood running down his cheek. "Maybe," he said, "but that spirit will outlive your empire." The soldiers looked at each other, uneasy. They had never seen a human talk back after capture. Zaroth walked closer again, his smile fading. He stared at Ryan for a long time. There was something unsettling about this man's calm defiance. The alien commander leaned close and whispered, "Then let us test your spirit." "Human." He raised his hand and pointed toward the observation window. "See your world out there? Your home?" Ryan looked, his eyes softening for a second. "Yes," he said quietly. Zaroth smiled cruelly. "Then you will watch it burn if you fail me." The room trembled as the ship's engines roared. The humans gasped as beams of light began to glow beneath the ship's surface. Zaroth turned to his guards. "Prepare the challenge," he ordered. He looked at Ryan again. "You will have your chance to prove this so-called spirit," Ryan frowned. "What challenge?" The alien smirked. "You will see soon enough." As the guards dragged Ryan away, he felt no fear inside. His mind was racing. He had to survive, not just for himself, but for every human who still believed in his heart. He made a promise. He would not let humanity be remembered as cowards. No matter what it took, he would make the alien eat his words. In the shadows of the corridor, alien soldiers whispered among themselves. "Why does the commander give him a chance?" One asked. "Because," another replied. "The commander enjoys breaking hope." But Ryan was not a man easily broken. Even as he was thrown into a cold cell, he closed his eyes and smiled faintly. "They think this is over," he thought. But it's only beginning. Outside, Earth glowed quietly, unaware of the struggle happening above. But in that single moment, within the heart of one man, a spark of defiance had been born, and that spark, small as it was, would soon set the stars on fire. The cell was dark and cold, the air thick with metal and silence. Captain Ryan Hale sat on the floor, his wrists chained to the wall. He could hear distant sounds, alien footsteps, the hum of engines, and low laughter. Every second felt like an hour, but his mind stayed sharp. He knew Zaroth had not finished with him yet. After some time, the door slid open with a hiss. 2 alien guards stepped inside, their armor glowing faintly. "Human, the commander wants you," one said in a deep voice. Ryan stood, his legs weak but steady. He followed them down a long corridor filled with flickering lights and strange symbols. When the doors opened, he was back in the grand hall. The same place where he had been mocked, but this time, the hall was filled with alien officers and soldiers. They stood in lines, their golden eyes watching him with cold curiosity. At the center, Commander Zaroth sat on a throne made of black metal, smiling. "Welcome back, Captain," Zaroth said, his voice calm yet dangerous. "I promised you a chance to prove your human spirit, and I am a creature of my word." Ryan stared at him. Saying nothing, the commander waved his hand, and a large hologram appeared in the air. It showed a harsh alien world, a place of sandstorms, burning suns, and endless wastelands. "This is Drevak 9, Zaroth said. "A planet with no water, no mercy, and no return for the weak." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You will go there," Zaroth continued, "alone, unarmed, and with only one day to survive. If you reach the ancient tower on the horizon before the twin suns set, you win. If you fail, I will destroy your planet." The aliens around the room laughed cruelly. Ryan stood silently, his heart pounding. He knew this was no challenge. It was a death sentence. Still, he lifted his chin. "And if I succeed?" he asked. Zaroth smiled. "Then I will bow before your people and admit I was wrong." The hall went silent for a moment. Even the aliens seemed surprised by their commander's words. Ryan took a deep breath. "Then I accept your challenge," he said. His voice was steady, without fear or hesitation. A murmur spread through the alien ranks. Zaroth leaned back, intrigued. "Interesting," he said softly. "Perhaps there is more to you than flesh and noise." Within hours, the ship descended toward the planet's burning surface. The heat was so intense that even the alien armor glowed red. Ryan was pushed toward the exit bay, his wrists now free. "Good luck." "Human," one of the guards said mockingly. Ryan gave a faint smile. "Luck is for those who doubt," he replied. As the doors opened, the light hit him like fire. The sand whipped around him like blades. The air was dry, choking, filled with a strange metallic taste. He looked around. Endless desert, cracked ground, and far away. A tall tower shimmered on the horizon, small but visible. "That's my way home," he whispered. He started walking, every step heavy but determined. The sun burned above him, and the wind screamed. His boots sank in the hot sand, his throat dry, his skin blistering. But he did not stop. Every moment he imagined Zaroth watching, laughing, waiting for him to fall. That thought gave him strength. Hours passed, and the heat grew worse. His body trembled, his breath came in gasps. He found no water, no shade, no life. Only the whisper of the wind and the memory of Earth. He thought of his people, his friends, his family. He thought of what humanity stood for. Courage, love, hope, and he kept walking back in the alien ship. Zaroth watched through a glowing screen. His soldiers gathered behind him, whispering among themselves. "He won't make it another hour," one said. "Humans always talk big before they die," another added. Zaroth smirked. "Perhaps, but let us see how long courage lasts without air or water." As the twin suns began to lower, the desert turned crimson. Ryan's vision blurred. His lips cracked, his legs shaking. He fell once, twice, his hands scraping against burning rocks. He almost gave in. But then, through the heat haze, he saw it, the tower, shining faintly like a promise with his last strength. He pushed himself up, step by step, dragging his body through the sand. The alien observers fell silent as they watched. Even Zaroth leaned forward, his smile gone. "What drives him?" One soldier whispered. Zaroth's voice was low. "I don't know." Ryan reached a rocky rise and collapsed. The tower still far, but closer than before, he lay there under the dying sun. His heart beat slow but steady, he whispered to himself. "Humans don't quit." Then he crawled forward again, leaving a trail in the red dust. The suns finally dipped below the horizon. The planet turned dark and cold, and somewhere in that frozen silence, a single human kept moving because to him, surrender was not an option. The twin suns rose again over Drevak 9, turning the sky into a sea of gold and fire. Ryan Hale woke with his face half buried in the sand. His body stiff and dry, every muscle screamed with pain. Every breath burned like smoke. He had no food, no water, and no shade. But he was still alive. That alone was a victory. He slowly pushed himself up, his eyes blinking against the light. The endless desert stretched before him. Cruel and silent, the tower was still far away, just a thin shadow on the horizon. He clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "One more step. Just one more." His boots sank deep into the sand as he walked. The ground shifted under him like waves, sweat ran down his face. Mixing with dust and blood, his lips were cracked, and his throat felt like glass, but he kept moving. One painful step after another. Above him, alien drones floated, watching his every move, their metal eyes glowing blue, recording his struggle for Zaroth's amusement. Inside the command ship, Zaroth sat on his throne. He watched the humans' slow march across the wasteland, his expression cold but curious. "Still alive," one of his officers said, surprised. "It has been 18 hours without rest or water." Zaroth smirked. "Humans are stubborn creatures, but even stubbornness breaks when the body collapses." He leaned forward slightly. Let him walk until the suns melt his bones. Back on the planet, the wind picked up. Sand whipped across Ryan's face like knives. He covered his mouth with his torn sleeve and kept going. Every few steps he stumbled, but he refused to fall for long in his mind. He heard his father's voice. "The hardest roads make the strongest men." He smiled faintly. "Guess I'm proving that right now." Hours passed and the heat turned brutal. He felt dizzy. Seeing shapes that weren't there once, he thought he saw water in the distance. Shining like a river, he ran toward it, his heart racing. But when he reached it, there was nothing and only sand. A cruel mirage laughing at his hope. Ryan fell to his knees, gasping for air. For a moment, he thought it was over. He looked at the sky, at the burning suns. Maybe this was how humanity ended, and in silence. Under alien eyes, but deep inside, something refused to give up. He clenched his fists into the sand and growled, "Not yet." He forced himself to stand again, his body shaking, his vision blurred. But each step became a promise to Earth, to the people watching somewhere, to prove that humans could do what no one believed possible. As he moved, the desert began to change. The flat dunes turned into rocky hills. Sharp black stones jutted out of the sand like blades. He had to climb, cutting his hands and knees on the sharp edges. Blood dripped down, leaving a trail behind him. Night came fast, cold and cruel. The heat vanished, replaced by freezing winds. The stars filled the sky, millions of them. Bright and strange, Ryan stared at them for a moment. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, his home. The thought gave him strength. He found a small cave between two rocks and crawled inside. His whole body trembled as he leaned against the wall. He could barely feel his fingers, he whispered softly. "Come on, Ryan." "Not now." He took off his torn jacket and wrapped it around his arms. Closing his eyes, he tried to rest. But nightmares came quickly in his dreams. He saw Zaroth's mocking face. He heard the laughter of aliens and the cries of his people. He saw cities burning, oceans drying, skies turning red. He woke with a shout, sweat covering his face despite the cold. His heart pounded and he looked toward the horizon again. The tower was still there, a dark shape against the dawn. He took a deep breath and stood up again. "No nightmare can stop me," he said quietly. At the same time, aboard the ship, Zaroth watched in silence. He expected the human to die long ago, yet the man continued, refusing to surrender. Something in Zaroth's chest stirred. Not respect, but unease. He turned to his officers. "Zoom closer," he ordered. The screen filled with Ryan's exhausted but determined face. Zaroth whispered, "Why do you keep walking, human?" Ryan, miles below, seemed to answer, though he could not hear. "Because I have something you will never understand." The wind howled around him as he climbed the final ridge. The desert stretched endlessly, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. Every wound, every scar, every tear was proof. Proof that humanity could endure anything. The suns began to rise again, painting the desert in gold. Ryan looked toward them and smiled weakly. His journey was far from over. But one thing was clear. The human spirit could not be broken. Not by heat, not by pain, not even by an empire of gods. The great command ship Voreth's Claw floated high above the burning desert of Dravak 9. Its engines hummed like thunder and its walls glowed with blue light. Inside the grand control chamber, dozens of alien officers stood before large viewing screens. Each screen showed a different angle of the desert. Endless dunes, fiery winds, and one small moving figure. The human was still alive. Commander Zaroth leaned forward in his throne. His golden eyes narrowed for the first time. There was no amusement in his face, 20 hours had passed since the human was sent down. No weapon, no water, no help, and yet he walked. Every logical report said he should have died long ago. "Commander," one of the officers said quietly. "His heart rate is weak but steady. His body temperature is unstable. Yet he continues moving." Another added, "It's not natural. No other species could survive this long." Zaroth waved a hand, silencing them. He stared at the screen where Ryan Hale climbed the black ridge under the rising suns. "What drives him?" Zaroth muttered to himself. He remembered the human's eyes back in the hall. Steady, fearless, almost challenging. That look had burned into his mind. It was the same look warriors of the old Core Empire once had before they were crushed. But this was no warrior of his kind. This was just a man, a fragile human. On the desert below, Ryan stumbled forward. His lips bled, his body shook, but he refused to fall. Every breath sounded like a knife scraping through his chest. His feet were covered in blisters. His skin burned red by the twin suns still, he whispered through cracked lips. "Not yet, not done." In the ship, an officer spoke again. "Commander, shall we end the experiment?" "He's nearly at the tower." Zaroth turned sharply, his voice low and cold. "End it." "No," he said. "I want to see how far he goes before his body breaks." "But sir—" "Enough," Zaroth snapped. "Observe and learn." He rose from his throne and walked to the observation window. The planet glowed below like a furnace. He remembered the countless species that had knelt before him. Strong, intelligent, proud, they had all broken in time, begging for mercy, but this human, this single creature from a small blue world refused to bend inside him. Something unfamiliar began to grow. It was not respect yet, but it was not contempt either. It was doubt. A quiet voice whispering that perhaps the Core Empire was not as invincible as it believed. He pushed the thought away, yet it stayed, like a shadow that refused to leave the light. Meanwhile, Ryan reached the edge of a dry canyon. The wind howled through the cracks, echoing like voices. He looked down. The path was narrow and sharp. One wrong step would mean death. He took a breath and began to climb, his hands bleeding against the rocks. He slipped once, his foot scraping the edge. But he caught himself and kept going. Every movement was slow, painful but steady. In the distance, the tower stood tall, closer now. Real and shining, it felt like a promise. A dream just out of reach, Ryan's vision blurred. But he smiled weakly. "You'll see, Zaroth," he whispered. "You'll see what a human can do." On the ship, Zaroth's second officer spoke again. "Commander, the human's vitals are falling. He won't last another hour." But Zaroth said nothing. He simply stared at the screen, his hands gripping the railing. There was a strange tightness in his chest, something like anticipation. Why doesn't he stop? Zaroth murmured again. His aide replied quietly. "Perhaps he still believes he can win." Zaroth's eyes flickered. "No, belief is for fools," he said quickly. But the words didn't feel true. The commander's heart beat faster, his mind restless. He thought of the look in Ryan's eyes, and for the first time, he realized he envied that fire. Hours passed, and the command deck grew quiet. No one laughed anymore, no one mocked. Even the soldiers who once joked about the weak human now watched in silence. Something about the man's struggle touched them, not with pity but with a strange kind of awe. When Ryan finally reached the canyon's end, he fell to his knees. He looked up at the tower, shining against the red sky. It was close now, only a few miles away. He smiled through his exhaustion. "I'm coming for you," he whispered. Zaroth heard the whisper through the drone feed. He stared at the screen in disbelief. Even near death, the human spoke like a conqueror, not like a prisoner or a victim. Zaroth stepped back slowly. He looked at his officers and saw the same confusion in their eyes. At last, the commander turned away from the window. "Keep watching him," he said, his voice quiet. Then he walked to his private chamber and stood alone in the dark. For the first time in years, Zaroth felt something he could not name. It wasn't anger nor fear, it was respect, the kind born only from witnessing the impossible. He whispered softly to himself, "What are you, human?" The sky above Dravak 9 burned with the color of dying fire. Twin suns sank behind the dunes, painting the world in red and gold. The wind carried dust across the endless desert, whispering through the rocks like ancient ghosts, and through that storm of heat and silence, A lone human still walked Captain Ryan Hale, bruised, bleeding, broken, but alive. His steps were slow, heavy, each one a fight against gravity and exhaustion. The tower stood in front of him now, tall and black. Its surface shining faintly like glass, it looked close enough to touch. But every time he reached for it, it seemed to move farther away. His heart pounded painfully in his chest. His breath shallow and rough. He fell once hard, his hands scraping against the hot ground. He stayed there for a moment, face pressed to the sand. Everything in him screamed to stop, to rest, to give up. But he heard his own voice whisper back, "Not yet." Above him, the alien drones hovered silently. Their lenses followed every move, every heartbeat, every breath aboard the Voreth's claw. The command deck was filled with tension. No one spoke, no one laughed now. Even Commander Zaroth stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the screen. The human was nearly at the tower, something no one had ever done before. "Commander," one of the officers said softly. "He's reached the final distance," another added. "He cannot survive another minute." "The suns are setting." Zaroth raised his hand to silence them. He watched as Ryan pushed himself up again. Trembling, there was blood on his lips, dust on his skin, fire in his eyes. Ryan looked at the tower and smiled faintly. "This is it," he whispered, "for Earth." For all of us, he began to crawl, his knees cutting into the sand, his arms shaking under his own weight. The last few meters felt like miles. His vision flickered between light and dark, between life and death, but deep inside, something kept him alive. The same stubborn spirit that had carried humanity through wars, loss, and chaos. In the control room, Zaroth felt his own heartbeat quicken. He didn't understand it, but he could feel the man's will through the screen. It was like watching the impossible take form, a creature of flesh defying the laws of survival, defying death itself, he whispered quietly. "This is madness." But the word didn't sound like an insult anymore. It sounded like admiration. Ryan's hand reached forward, touching the base of the tower. The surface was cool against his burned skin. He looked up at it, barely able to see through the haze in his eyes. "I made it," he breathed. "You said I couldn't, but I did." He pulled the small, tattered flag of Earth from his pocket, the one he had hidden since the capture. Its colors were faded, edges burned, but it was still whole with shaking hands. He planted it into the sand beside the tower. The flag stood tall, waving weakly in the alien wind. In that moment, time itself seemed to pause. Even the desert wind grew silent. The drones stopped moving, their sensors flickering. And far above, inside the alien ship, every officer stood frozen. No one could believe what they were seeing. Zaroth took a slow step forward, his golden eyes wide. The screen showed the human kneeling beside the flag, head bowed but smiling. He was broken, dying, yet somehow victorious. "Commander," one of the officers whispered. "He did it." Zaroth didn't answer. He just stared. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The room stayed silent for several seconds before Zaroth finally spoke. "Bring him up," he said quietly. His officers hesitated, shocked. "Sir, you mean?" "Yes," Zaroth said firmly. "Bring him aboard now." Moments later, a beam of blue light shone down from the ship. It surrounded Ryan's body, lifting him gently into the air. His head tilted slightly as he floated upward. Eyes half open, he saw the sky glowing with alien light. And for the first time since the challenge began, he allowed himself to rest. When he awoke, he was lying on a medical platform. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of alien machines. Standing before him was Commander Zaroth. No longer smiling, the alien looked down at him, his voice softer than before. "You survived," he said almost to himself. Ryan's lips curved into a tired smile. "Told you, humans don't break." Zaroth stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. The room fell silent as every alien in sight froze. Their commander, the undefeated warlord of the core empire, had knelt before a human. He spoke quietly, but his words echoed through the hall. "I was wrong," he said. "Humanity is not weak." Ryan looked at him, exhausted but proud. "Now you understand," he whispered. And for the first time in core history, the aliens bowed their heads to a species they once mocked. Far away, on the small blue world called Earth, a silent star in the galaxy began to shine a little brighter. The great warship Voreth's Claw floated silently in the darkness of space. For the first time in centuries, the halls of the core empire's flagship were filled not with laughter or arrogance, but silence. The soldiers who once mocked humanity now spoke in whispers. They had seen the impossible, a dying human who reached the tower and made their mighty commander kneel. Captain Ryan Hale sat weakly on the metal floor of the alien medical bay. His skin was pale, his body wrapped in silver healing bands that glowed softly. Machines hummed around him, keeping him alive. He could barely move, but his eyes were still sharp, still burning with quiet fire. When the door opened, every alien soldier in the room straightened. Commander Zeroth entered, his heavy steps echoing in the silence. But something was different about him now. The pride in his eyes was gone, replaced by something colder, deeper, something like respect. He stopped beside Ryan's bed, looking down at the man who had changed everything. "You should be dead," Zeroth said softly. Ryan gave a faint smile. "That's what everyone keeps saying." The alien stared at him. "Why didn't you stop? Even when your body was breaking?" Ryan's voice was weak but steady. "Because if I gave up, it wouldn't just be me losing, it would be all of humanity." He took a slow breath. "And I don't lose." Zeroth turned away, staring out the window at the stars. He spoke as if to himself. "The core empire has conquered 100 worlds, but never has one man brought it to silence." He clenched his fist. "Your kind." "You are strange," Ryan smiled slightly. "We've been called worse." Days passed and rumors spread through the fleet. Every core ship in orbit spoke of the human who endured. Officers whispered in disbelief, wondering what kind of species could create such strength from weakness. Some began to question the Empire's cruelty. Others felt fear that humanity, though small, might one day rise against them all. Zeroth's council demanded answers. They gathered in the high chamber, their armor shining under white light. One elder spoke first. "Commander, this act of mercy, it shames us," another hissed. "He is an animal, not a warrior. You should have let him die." Zeroth's eyes flashed with anger. "An animal?" he repeated quietly. "He crossed Druvek 9 without armor, without aid, without fear." He stepped closer to the council, his voice cold as steel. "If that is an animal, then perhaps the core are nothing but shadows." The chamber fell silent. No one dared speak for the first time in their long history. The Empire's commander defended a human, and deep inside, Zeroth knew the world had changed. Later, he returned to Ryan's room. The human sat quietly, his body still weak but healing faster than expected. "Your people will want you back," Zeroth said. "The message has been sent." Ryan nodded slowly. "They'll come." Zeroth studied him for a long time. "Tell me something," the alien asked. "Do all humans have your courage?" Ryan's answer was simple. "Every human has it. Some just don't know it yet." That night, Zeroth stood alone in his command chamber. He looked out at the stars, each one a world he had conquered for years. He believed the universe belonged to the strongest, but now he saw strength was not about muscle or weapons. It was about will, the will to rise even when everything falls apart. And in that, the humans were unmatched across the ship. Soldiers began treating Ryan not as a prisoner, but as something greater. Some saluted him as he passed. Others left small offerings of water and food at his door. One young alien whispered, "You made the commander bow. No one has ever done that." Ryan simply replied, "I didn't make him bow, truth did." When Earth's ship finally arrived to take him home, the Corps gathered on the docking deck. Thousands of soldiers stood in rows. Silent and watchful, Ryan limped forward, his steps slow but proud as he reached the ramp. Zeroth stepped in front of him. For a moment they stared at each other, two warriors from worlds apart. Then Zeroth extended his arm, the alien salute of respect. Ryan looked at it, smiled, and clasped his hand firmly. "Farewell." "Captain Hale," Zeroth said, his voice steady. "May your people never lose that fire." Ryan replied quietly, "And may yours never forget it." As the human ship lifted off, Zeroth stood watching. Around him, his soldiers bowed their heads. The commander spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "The age of fear is ending," he said, "and the age of respect begins." In that moment, the core empire, and once proud, cruel, and invincible, began to change, and far beyond the stars, the story of one human's courage began to echo across galaxies. The universe would never see humanity the same way again. The stars glimmered softly across the endless black ocean of space. The ship carrying Captain Ryan Hale drifted through the void. Heading home inside, the air was quiet, calm after the storm. Ryan sat near a window, his gaze fixed on the fading image of the core flagship behind them. He could still see its lights glowing like distant embers. The memory of what happened there burned brighter than any star. He closed his eyes, replaying it all in the challenge. The pain, the tower, the laughter of Zaroth when it all began, and the silence that followed when he triumphed. He remembered the look in the alien's eyes when he knelt. It wasn't fear, it was understanding. That moment had changed more than one life. It had changed an empire. Down on Earth, the news had already reached the people. Broadcasts echoed across every city, every colony, every outpost. The human who endured, they called him. The story spread faster than light. Across star stations, lunar colonies, and far-off listening posts everywhere, people whispered his name with pride. Ryan Hale had done what no one thought possible. When his ship finally entered Earth's orbit, a voice came over the comms, trembling with emotion. "Welcome home, Captain Hale. You're not just a soldier anymore, you're a symbol." He smiled faintly. Tired but proud, the ship descended through the clouds. Golden light spilling over the planet. Cities glowed below like constellations come alive. Crowds gathered as he stepped onto Earth's soil once again. Millions watched the broadcast across screens and stations. Children held tiny Earth flags, families cheered. But Ryan didn't raise his hand in victory. He simply looked up at the sky and whispered, "It wasn't about me. It was about us." The world had changed while he was gone. For centuries, humanity had been divided by nations, by greed, by fear. But now, for the first time, they stood united. Because one man had shown them that the human spirit had no limit. He had reminded them who they truly were. Meanwhile, in the far reaches of the galaxy, the core empire was no longer the same. Commander Zaroth's decision to bow before a human had shaken their very foundation. Old laws were rewritten. Young warriors began to question the empire's cruelty. Some spoke of peace, others of honor. A quiet movement began, one that sought understanding instead of domination. In secret, messages were sent between the stars. Earth and core ambassadors began to speak, not as enemies but as equals. For the first time, humanity was not seen as prey or property. They were seen as something greater and a force of will, a living reminder that courage could exist in even the smallest world. Back on Earth, Ryan found it hard to return to normal life. He walked among crowds who smiled and waved, but inside he felt distant. He had seen too much, endured too much, yet when he looked into the eyes of children who dreamed of the stars, he smiled again, because he knew their future would be brighter than his past. One night he sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed softly. The stars reflected in the water. Beside him lay a small device, a communicator gifted by Zaroth before his departure. It blinked once and a familiar voice came through, calm and deep. "Captain Hale," Zaroth said. "The galaxy speaks your name." Ryan chuckled softly. "Then let it remember humanity's name too." There was a pause. Then the alien said, "It already does." As the signal faded, Ryan leaned back, gazing at the stars. He thought about how small humanity once seemed, and how far they had come, not with power, but with heart. The galaxies were vast, filled with endless unknowns, but now, humanity had a place among them, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as survivors, as dreamers. Years later, stories of Ryan Hale became legend. Children studied his journey in schools. Artists painted his struggle on great murals. Alien historians recorded his courage in their archives and across countless worlds. Whenever someone faced the impossible, they whispered, "Be like the human who would not fall." In time, his name faded into history, but his spirit remained. It lived in every explorer who set foot on a new world, in every person who stood tall when fear whispered to kneel, in every heart that refused to surrender. That was the legacy of humanity. Not strength of body, but strength of soul. And as the centuries passed, the story of a single man on a burning planet became more than legend. It became a truth written in the stars, that no matter how vast the darkness, no matter how cruel the odds, there would always be one voice, one spark, one human, who would rise and say, "Not yet."